Welcome in to another new AMP podcast. I'm your host, Ben Dubose, and I'm the news editor with the AMP publications team. Today, we're talking with Will Maize, Director of Product Management and Corporate Strategy at MOBILTEX. Since 1985, Canada-based MOBILTEX has worked to develop specialized wireless data transmission devices to deliver unique and remote monitoring solutions, which can be used within a wide range of applications and industries. The company has worked closely with its clients and industry partners to develop industrial Internet of Things solutions that tightly align with business process requirements. And in the process of doing so, MOBILTEX is aiming to raise the bar for its clients when it comes to effective asset management, employee safety, and operating efficiency. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time to join us. How are you?
Hey, Ben, doing very well. Thanks for having me, and a pleasure to be with the AMP community again.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you. If you want more resources from AMP, of course, you can go to amp.org. Should also mention our publication websites. I work with Materials Performance, which you can access at materialsperformance.com, and Coatings Pro Magazine, which you can access at coatingspromag.com. All right, as far as today's discussion, which is going to be largely about strategic cathodic protection automation, or strategic CP automation for short. Will's got a lot of expertise on that front as an expert with MOBILTEX. Before we get into some of the particulars, Will, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about MOBILTEX beyond the brief description that I already gave.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ben. Will Mays. I've been with MOBILTEX for over 4 years now. Joined just in the later stages of 2019. As you said before, I kind of look after our product and our corporate strategies. So both of those roles require a sensitivity to the industry and kind of trying to stay abreast of the requirements of our customers, stay abreast of kind of the technology changes, but also really just trying to make sure that we're developing new technology and new features, new products in the right direction that are really answering the questions for our customers out there. So that's largely what I do. I like to, customer facing, like to, interview a lot of customers, get feedback, and just corral that into requirements for next stage designs, essentially. So it's quite a fun role in the sense that I can kind of, 6 months prior to a new feature, kind of get that preliminary research filtered through, and then you see the customer's response once it's actually delivered.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
yeah, so my background, civil engineer. I have an MBA as well from a school over in Barcelona. So yeah, traveled around the world and really worked within the critical infrastructure technology space for over a decade now. MOBILTEX is a Canadian technology player, as you mentioned. We've been in the remote monitoring space within cathodic protection and corrosion prevention, I should say, the two sides of CP, for almost 3 decades. Yeah, we've been largely pioneering a lot of the technology developments in that space. We have a range of application-specific products, lots of kind of fixed node hardware, which would transmit data back to a cloud platform, and also a range of field instrumentation that would be used in different types of portable applications as well, whether it's data logging or interrupters, etc. So that's kind of our primary business. We also have a business that's in the water pressure management space, which is not as core to kind of the AMP and materials performance communities, but it is still kind of around pipeline integrity and kind of optimized network monitoring as well. So that's somewhat relevant.
Yeah. For those who want more information about MOBILTEX, of course, you can go to mobiltex.com. But for a more synthesized version of it, for our audience at AMP and MP, what are some of the primary markets you serve? For example, I think of pipeline integrity a lot when I think of MOBILTEX. Just walk us through, if you could, who your desired customers are and the spaces they play in.
Sure. Yeah. The majority of our customers are oil and gas pipeline operators in the midstream space. So, larger diameter, high pressure applications moving product, whether it's some derivative of an oil product or gas network distribution, transmission, etc. That midstream space is really the majority of our customers, but we also have players in the upstream space, in the downstream space, and then some facilities as well. So tank applications, storage facilities, etc. That's the vast majority of customers. And Generally, we're engaging with people across the integrity team, and more specifically within the cathodic protection program or the corrosion prevention program within those
Mhm.
integrity teams.
So one of the focal points for you all and your business is strategic CP automation, as I mentioned leading off. What does that mean to MOBILTEX? What is the vision with strategic CP automation and where is it going?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, I like the nuance of how you said that. Is what does it mean and kind of where is it going? Because I think something as bold as strategic CP automation requires a bit of nuance and understanding that we're at a specific
Hmm.
maturity of that statement right now, and will certainly be at a different maturity of that statement in the future. But to like unpack it, just to get into the actual words used, to us, like the automation element um, really comes down to trying to automate specific workflows that are being done, at present in ways that are potentially manual,
Hmm.
or potentially using labor that is required to go to your remote locations, collect data that could easily be transmitted from a device, et cetera. It's really trying to come up with ways to help the workforce digitize their workflow essentially, and then over time to
Hmm.
help automate that. And now I think when we talk about automation in the future, there's a broader concept of thinking about how you could automate the actual sensitivity of the cathodic protection system to be to kind of vary up and down depending on the performance or depending on the weather conditions or depending on other specific incidents at site, right? And then
Hmm.
if you're thinking about strategic automation in that sense, then you're having a more responsive CP network in the future that is able to
Hmm.
self-regulate in a certain way. So that's kind of unpacking the automation statement. And then the strategic side is just as interesting and just as nuanced. And really the strategy, I think, comes down to kind of how we align with the various kind of the strategy that our customers have in delivering their cathodic protection programs. Because as you kind of unpacked with the like who's our customer audience, a midstream operator in the United States is going to approach cathodic protection programs very differently from a gas collection system player in Canada, for example. So the strategies might vary depending on the type of conditions their pipelines run through, the type of pipelines that they have in terms of age, coding, et cetera. And really the core drivers that are or the pain points in their operating programs that are kind of pulling them towards technology in the first place, all of those elements will kind of dictate how they think about strategic CP automation from the strategy perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. We touched on the industrial Internet of Things earlier. How have you seen that technology evolve in recent years to the point where you can potentially bring all this stuff we're talking about in the future into the present?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in a couple of different ways. One of which is cloud computing, and the ability to provide data to customers in an efficient manner, in a manner that has kind of redundancy and security that's required by the industry today. Cybersecurity is a huge driver for a lot of operators. We've seen some incidents happening in the midstream space over the last couple of years. So cybersecurity requirements and kind of some of the cloud computing advantages has certainly driven that. And even within MobileTex, we've been on a journey over the past 3 years to migrate towards a commercially hosted cloud platform as our core
Mm.
data management platform. In other ways, things around kind of cellular data plans. If you think about data transmission, the volume of data that you can move at more affordable rates has increased over the past decade quite tremendously. And that's enabled us to do things like put a remote data logger on the market where you can actually capture transient events or dynamic interference events, but actually translate that data to a cloud environment quite efficiently. That's something that a decade ago wouldn't have been possible in a cost-effective manner. And then finally, I think some of that efficiency on the technology side has also let us have a bit more freedom around building low power remote like autonomous long-term autonomous products for remote areas. So if you think about remote monitoring, um, the CP space, I mean, rectifiers have been remotely monitored as one of the first kind of adoption waves. But rectifiers generally have a power source and provide the ability to always power up your remote sensor. But something like a bond, a critical bond that you need to interrupt in order to conduct a survey, et cetera, there's not often power sources there. So the ability to provide battery powered remote interrupters that can actually last in the field for upwards of 5 to 10 years is something that's been enabled by technology over the past decade as well. And certainly, as things continue to evolve, I think those types of applications will continue to proliferate in the industry.
We're talking now with Will Maize, Director of Product Management and Corporate Strategy at MOBILTEX. I'm Ben Dubose, news editor with the AMP Publications team. When you talk to people out in the industry, what is their focus today? You've touched on your customers a few times. What are their focal points in 2023 heading into 2024? And what are some of the potential changes in the years ahead?
Yeah, I think that's actually, it kind of circles us back around to the strategic element of strategic automation. And it's, for me, it's the most interesting part of this conversation is that the customer base is, I wouldn't say divided, but I think we're still early on in this broad journey of digitization around cathodic protection programs.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that there's still kind of different groups of customers that are driven by different needs. Some groups you could say are driven by more operating concerns. So you have groups that are adopting remote monitoring technologies or strategic automation driven by the lack of access to remote locations. Or potentially you might have a homeowner that's not complying with access requirements, but you still need to get into the property to perform a reading. Things like that. Technology can help reduce the amount of time people are driving, can reduce the risks associated with that, and also, give you data from remote locations. So that's kind of one bucket. Another bucket are folks that are kind of going and saying, hey, I want to fully automate my entire data collection regime. And every single asset that I have right now that's going to be manually visited, let's just automate that concept and use technology to do so. So in that sense, they're almost like an evangelistic approach to saying, I have the technology to do it today. Let's just go and do this, and let's prove to the regulator that I don't need to send somebody on an annual basis. And then the third bucket is well, and again, these are kind of blended in nuance, but on another area, you have operators that are driving towards more of a performance-based concept. And there's an organization called IECM. There with some network and the operators that are involved with that and some other players and whatnot. And they're using mechanistic modeling to say, well, if I have specific locations where I'm collecting data and I'm collecting a specific or a broader set of data at those locations, can I actually infer the performance of my cathodic protection system or the actual kind of impact on that pipeline asset? So, that in a way is also is another form of strategic CP optimization or automation, I should say, in the long run. So yeah, I think the pain points are shared across these operating groups, but the way that they're thinking about them and strategizing in terms of dealing with them into the future is still somewhat undefined, and that's what I find interesting.
So when we talk about this whole dynamic, when it comes to not just pain points, but I would say questions, whenever we're talking about new technology and putting it in place out in the field, there's oftentimes a big question of implementation that comes
Yeah.
with that. How do you work with your users and potential customers to address their concerns, their questions? Because obviously you can have all the technology in the world and it's only as good as the user's ability to successfully implement it. So what are some of the
Absolutely.
challenges, if any, on the implementation side, and how do you work with your customers or potential customers to address those?
Yeah, that's a great question. There certainly are challenges, and again, kind of, I would like to think still in the early stages of the broader adoption. So I think now is the time to really make those known and to help our customers address them early. But I think, yeah, to identify a few things. One thing that you can do is to build product that provides kind of a way to make issues obvious.
Mm.
or a way to make things redundant. So one of the challenges in industry, especially when you're talking about a longer term monitoring application, there's a lot of mixed emotions, I'll say, about permanent reference electrodes and the
Hmm.
statement of putting in a reference electrode for a permanent application. Like how long is that reference electrode going to be stable and providing good data, right? So for us, when we hear that feedback from our customers, we try to conduct R&D programs with them to say, okay, well, let's work together. Let's put some installations in, and let's set up a reporting regime or a monitoring program that we can actually start to identify how these things perform in the field and identify how what a failing unit or what a slipping unit could actually look like, right?
Mm.
So if we could be very active in trying to address that specific barrier, I think. So that's one way to do it, and there's some redundancy built in some of our devices that you could use to make that a bit more efficient as well.
Hmm.
The other thing you can do, and I think we are striving to do, is to help deal with this data proliferation as well. So what I mean by that is, when you have, let's say, 1,000 units installed, um, you've got a heck of a lot more data than you used to get on these assets, and you need to be able to quickly and efficiently organize that data, know how to filter it, know how to
Mm.
store it, know how to pull it into your other reporting platforms, and those kind of workflows. Hopefully, we can help the customer, deal with just in terms of kind of our core
Hmm.
cloud platform. And then I think the final point, I think, one thing you hit on the head is like the implementation side, like the installation side,
Right.
configuring units, etc. Training, engagement with partners, engagement with customers, being really transparent with people. That's super key for trying to make sure that all the shared learnings, from the bad experiences to the good, are kind of available for reference before
Hmm.
someone embarks on a broad scale installation
Yeah.
program. Because I mean, the key element of getting benefit from remote monitoring units is to make sure that when you install them, they're installed correctly
Right.
and configured correctly,
Hmm.
having the right alarm settings, the right alarm limits to trigger additional readings,
Yep.
et cetera. Because I mean, yeah, the amount of value that you get from a unit, is directly, correlated to putting it on correctly, having everything
Yep.
set up well, and not having to go
Absolutely.
back to that site, right?
Yep. So talking about the industry as a whole, I work with AMP. I'm the news editor with AMP Publications. So we have a lot of resources and ability to reach out to people across the entire spectrum of corrosion control, protective coatings, you name it. When we talk about a lot of the challenges that you've laid out over the last 15 minutes or so, what are ways in which an association like AMP can potentially assist in helping overcome those challenges? What are some of the issues that we can potentially work together as an association, as a group of people or companies, talking industry wide here, going beyond simply, one company selling a given unit? What are some of the things that we can work collaboratively together to potentially solve and move the ball forward on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just you know, at a foundational level, AMP, in its community of setting up webinars, or I think more importantly, the annual show, just enables everybody to
Hmm.
get in the same room and to kind of spitball on ideas, issues,
Hmm.
all of the CP streams within the paper presentations, as well as a great
Yep.
ecosystem for sharing ideas. And I think, generally those skew towards more academic style papers where you're
Sure.
presenting on a specific kind of application, or in our case, usually associated with some sort of machine learning that we're trying to apply to data. But I think more and more, we saw a couple of good presentations from other vendors last year, just talking about
Mm.
installation programs and more of a case study approach. But I think those are educational to the extent where operators are aware of what's happening. So I
Mhm.
think more of that would be useful. I also know there's a couple of steering committees associated with remote monitoring that AMP is supporting and driving through its steering committee network. So those
Yeah.
are those are probably something that should continue to be focused on, and then in the long run, writing specifications around remote monitoring requirements
Mhm.
or guidelines essentially about how this all
Yep.
works. And I think the industry at whole is already being steered in that sense by some of the AMP guidelines. We develop product that help facilitate the data collection to meet those standards, right? So
Mhm.
that's already being done to a certain extent. Yeah, I think just more discussion on the issue. I think engaging with the regulator, of course, is something that I would like to
Sure.
say as a vendor we can probably do more of, but in my experience, it's quite difficult to, and it's really coming down to the operator side to make sure that they're actively engaging and where possible bringing us into the room if we can.
Mhm.
I do think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of how that whole process is done from a technology perspective, but it's not necessarily our place to comment on that because we're not actively involved. So
That's fair. All right, we're winding down our conversation with Will Maize, Director of Product Management and Corporate Strategy at MOBILTEX. Will, for your company in particular, what are some of your expectations for 2024 and potentially beyond? I'm not asking you to give away the farm in terms of, financial metrics, anything too specific, but just in terms of broad parameters, what your expectations are for the company, for the industry. What do you think next year and perhaps the next few years look like?
yeah, thanks. I think for us, we're very excited. We're very excited about the year that we're having right now. Even just the ability for our business to kind of just keep growing our community of customers and progressive customers at that. We've made a splash in an overseas market that we hadn't been in before. So we're quite excited about the opportunity there. It's an opportunity in Europe to kind of move our core business into remote monitoring for CP as well. And I think one of the exciting things there is that we can hopefully bring back some of the learnings of the European market to our North American customer base as well. And
Yep.
can we grow the industry there just from the cross pollination will be exciting for us.
Yep.
And then yeah, in the longer term, I think back to those kind of different strategies around CP automation. We're trying to help our customers define their future and helping them have the tools to do that as well. But I
Yep.
think we're excited about which direction our customers will go and how they're going to define the future for themselves and of course hopefully pull us along as a happy compatriot in that sense. So yeah, lots to be excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure sounds like it. All right, folks, that is Will Mays of MobileTex. If you want more information from them, the website is mobiletex.com. They also have active social media pages on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Will, is there anything else you want to plug before we wrap up as far as ways that people can learn more or perhaps get in touch with you guys?
Don't think so. I think yeah, just go to the AMP website or Materials Performance, I should say, the webinar page. Search for Mobile Text. We've got lots of
Yep.
archived
Great point.
webinars. I think we just finished our eighth or our ninth one about a month or a half ago. So I would say that those were great resources. And then yeah, just fire us any questions you have, and we love to engage with everybody. So yeah, don't
Yep.
be shy.
Sounds great. All right, folks, we will wrap it there. Again, for Will Mays of MobileTex, I'm Ben Dubose of the AMP Publications team. If you want more resources, mobiletex.com is their website. For us at AMP, it's ampp.org. And within the publications division, you can go to Materials Performance at materialsperformance.com or Coatings Pro Magazine at coatingspromag.com. All right, with the plugs complete, we'll wrap up. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new AMP podcast.